Sarah Chen stood at the kitchen window of her Boston brownstone, watching autumn leaves scatter across the manicured lawn. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman of 32 who looked older, with shadows beneath her eyes that no concealer could hide. Behind her, she heard Marcus enter the room, his footsteps deliberate and measured. She didn't turn around. "You forgot to pick up my dry cleaning," he said, his voice calm but edged with something sharp. Her hands tightened around the coffee mug. "I'm sorry. I had that presentation at work, and I don't want excuses, Sarah. I want my shirts." She turned to face him then, taking in his perfectly styled hair and expensive suit. Marcus Chen was everything her parents had dreamed of when they pushed her toward him 8 years ago. Harvard-educated, a successful corporate lawyer, from a good family. On paper, he was perfect. In reality, he was her prison warden. "I'll get them today," she whispered. He stepped closer, and she instinctively moved back against the counter. He noticed. He always noticed. A cold smile touched his lips. "Are you afraid of me, Sarah? Your own husband?" He reached out and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, the gesture almost tender except for the pressure of his fingers against her skull. "That's insulting. I've never laid a hand on you." It was true. Marcus had never hit her. He didn't need to. His weapons were words, silence, and control. He monitored her phone, her emails, her bank account. He decided what she wore, where she went, who she could see. Her college friends had drifted away years ago, tired of cancelled plans and her increasingly transparent excuses. Her parents lived in California, too far away to see the truth she hid behind forced smiles during video calls. "I know," she said softly. "I'm not afraid." "Good." He kissed her forehead, and she held her breath. "I have a late meeting tonight. I want dinner waiting at 9 sharp. The salmon I like, with those roasted vegetables." After he left, Sarah sank into a chair and let the tears come. She cried silently, a skill she'd perfected over the years. The walls of their beautiful home felt like they were closing in, suffocating her with their designer paint and expensive artwork. Everything Marcus chose. Everything Marcus controlled. Her phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor. The museum where she worked as a junior curator was hosting a new exhibit next month, Warriors of the Great Plains, Lakota History and Culture. They wanted her to lead the project. It was the opportunity she'd been waiting for, a chance to prove herself beyond her current administrative role. But Marcus would never allow it. The extra hours, the travel to meet with tribal representatives, the attention it would bring her, he'd find 1,000 reasons why she should decline. He always did. That evening, as she prepared his salmon, Sarah made a decision. She would take the project. She wouldn't ask permission, she would simply do it. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. It was such a small act of rebellion, but it felt monumental. When Marcus came home at 9:15, the salmon was perfectly cooked. He ate in silence, scrolling through his phone. Sarah pushed food around her plate, her stomach too knotted with anxiety to eat. "I got offered a new project at work," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Leading an exhibit on Lakota culture." He didn't look up. "You'll turn it down." "Actually, I already accepted." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus slowly set down his fork and raised his eyes to meet hers. She saw the anger there, cold and calculated. "You accepted without discussing it with me first." His voice was dangerously quiet. "It's my job, Marcus. My decision." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You seem to have forgotten your place in this marriage, Sarah. Perhaps you need a reminder of who provides this house, who pays for everything you have." She stood too, trembling but determined. "I work. I contribute." "You play at working," he sneered. "Your little museum job is a hobby I allow you to maintain. Don't confuse it with actual importance." That night, Sarah lay awake in their bed, Marcus's back turned to her in cold dismissal. She stared at the ceiling and wondered how her life had become so small, so suffocating. The exhibit would start soon. She would meet with tribal elders, handle precious artifacts, tell stories of a people who had survived against impossible odds. She needed some of that survival instinct now. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the museum's largest gallery, overseeing the installation of display cases. The exhibit was coming together beautifully, each artifact telling a story of resilience and cultural pride. She'd thrown herself into the work, using it as a shield against Marcus's escalating displeasure at home. He'd stopped speaking to her except when necessary. He'd cancelled their joint credit cards and put her on an allowance. He'd started coming home even later, making her wait with cold dinners and churning anxiety. But she hadn't quit. Every morning, she drove to the museum and lost herself in the project. Miss Chen? Her assistant, David, approached with a clipboard. The delegation from Pine Ridge is here early. Should I bring them up? Her heart jumped. The Lakota representatives weren't scheduled to arrive until afternoon. She'd planned to have everything perfect before they saw the space. She glanced down at her simple black dress and low heels, suddenly feeling underprepared. Yes, of course. Please bring them up. She smoothed her hair and tried to calm her racing pulse. This meeting mattered. These artifacts, these stories, they belonged to living people with living culture. She desperately wanted to honor that truth. The elevator doors opened, and 3 people emerged. An elderly woman with silver hair braided down her back, wearing traditional dress adorned with intricate beadwork. A middle-aged man in jeans and a button-down shirt, carrying a leather portfolio. And a younger man who made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. He was tall, probably 6'3", with long black hair pulled back in a simple tie. He wore dark jeans, boots, and a white shirt under a black vest decorated with geometric patterns in red and gold. But it was his face that held her attention, strong features, dark eyes that seemed to see everything, and an expression of quiet dignity that reminded her of the historical photographs she'd been studying. Miss Chen? The elderly woman extended her hand. I'm Margaret Stands Tall. This is my nephew, Robert Little Bear, and Thomas Broken Rope. The younger man was Thomas Broken Rope. Of course he was. She'd read about him in her research, a tribal council member at only 35, educated in both Lakota traditions and Western law, known for his fierce advocacy for native rights and cultural preservation. Sarah shook hands with each of them, trying to ignore how her skin tingled when Thomas's large, calloused hand engulfed hers. His grip was firm but gentle. Thank you for coming, she said. I know you had concerns about the exhibit, and I want to assure you that our primary goal is respectful representation. We've heard that before, Thomas said, his voice deep and measured. Usually right before we see our sacred objects displayed like curiosities, our stories twisted to fit convenient narratives. His directness startled her. Marcus never spoke plainly. Everything with him was implication and innuendo, hidden threats wrapped in civilized language. I understand your skepticism, Sarah replied, meeting his gaze. Would you like to see what we've planned? For the next 2 hours, she guided them through the gallery, explaining each section, the story she wanted to tell, the context she planned to provide. Margaret asked thoughtful questions. Robert took extensive notes. Thomas mostly watched, his dark eyes moving from the displays to Sarah's face and back again. When they reached the section on leadership and governance, Thomas finally spoke at length. You have information here about the chief system, but it's incomplete. You're presenting it through a European lens, hierarchy, authority, power. That's not how it worked. Sarah pulled out her notebook. Please, tell me. I want to get it right. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. He explained how Lakota leadership was based on merit and consensus, how chiefs were chosen for their wisdom and generosity, not their ability to dominate others. How true leadership meant serving the people, not ruling them. Sarah wrote frantically, her mind making connections. This was everything Marcus wasn't. This was leadership as sacrifice, not control. You're really listening, Margaret observed, a smile warming her weathered face. This is important, Sarah said simply. They worked through lunch, ordering sandwiches and continuing their discussions. Sarah felt more alive than she had in years. These people treated her like an equal, valued her questions, challenged her assumptions respectfully. When she made a mistake in terminology, Thomas corrected her with patience, not condescension. As the afternoon light slanted through the gallery windows, Robert checked his watch. We should head back to our hotel. Long day tomorrow at the archives. Before you go, Sarah said quickly, would you consider coming back? I'd value your input throughout the installation process. I want to make sure we're representing everything accurately. Margaret and Robert agreed immediately. Thomas studied her for a long moment. Why does this matter so much to you? He asked. The question caught her off guard. She could give him the professional answer about cultural sensitivity and museum ethics. Instead, she found herself speaking from somewhere deeper. Because stories matter. Because history isn't just about the past, it shapes how we see the world now, who has power, whose voices get heard. Getting this right means honoring truth. Even when truth is uncomfortable. Thomas asked. Especially then. He nodded slowly. We'll come back. After they left, Sarah stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by artifacts that had survived despite centuries of attempts to erase them. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Where are you? You should have been home an hour ago. She looked at the message, then at the eagle feather display Margaret had helped her arrange properly. For the first time in 8 years, she didn't feel the usual spike of panic at Marcus's displeasure. She typed back, working late. Don't wait up. Then she turned off her phone and got back to work. The exhibit consumed Sarah's life over the next month, and she was grateful for it. Every day at the museum meant hours away from Marcus's cold fury and calculated punishments. He'd escalated from silence to subtle sabotage, hiding her car keys, deleting her alarm settings, throwing out her work clothes and replacing them with things he chose. But something had shifted in Sarah. The more time she spent with Margaret, Robert, and Thomas, learning about a culture that valued community over control, generosity over possession, the harder it became to accept Marcus's version of marriage. Thomas came to the museum 3 times a week, often staying late to help Sarah refine the interpretive text or arrange artifacts in ways that honored their original contexts. They fell into an easy working relationship, though Sarah found herself increasingly aware of him, the way he moved with unconscious grace, his careful hands handling sacred objects, his patience when explaining complex cultural concepts. One evening, they were alone in the gallery, adjusting the lighting on a display of traditional weapons. Sarah climbed a ladder to reach the overhead spots, and her heel caught on a rung. She stumbled, and Thomas was there instantly, his hand steady on her waist, catching her. Careful, he said, his voice close to her ear. She could feel the warmth of him, the solid strength. For a moment, she froze, unused to a man's touch that didn't make her want to flinch. Then she realized she was leaning into it, seeking comfort, and she pulled away quickly. I'm fine. Thank you. But her hands were shaking as she climbed down. Thomas noticed, of course. He noticed everything. Sarah, he said gently, you don't have to be afraid. I'm not, she stopped, unable to complete the lie. How did you know? I see you jump when your phone rings. I see you check the time constantly, like you're on a deadline for something other than work. I see the way you apologize for things that don't need apology. He paused. And I saw the bruise on your wrist last week, shaped like fingerprints. That had been from Marcus grabbing her when she tried to leave during an argument. She'd covered it with bracelets and long sleeves since. You're married, Thomas continued when she didn't speak. I met your husband when he came by last week. Sarah remembered. Marcus had shown up unannounced, ostensibly to take her to lunch. Really, to mark his territory. He'd been coldly polite to Thomas, possessive with Sarah, making it clear she belonged to him. I don't want to talk about Marcus, she said. Okay. Thomas accepted this without pressing. Want to tell me about the beadwork patterns instead? She could have cried at his kindness, at being allowed to deflect without judgment. Instead, she threw herself into explaining the symbolic meanings of different geometric designs, and they worked until the security guard came to tell them the museum was closing. In the parking garage, Thomas walked her to her car. Sarah, if you ever need help. I won't, she said quickly. But thank you. She drove home to find Marcus waiting in the dark living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Working late again, he said. With that Indian. The slur made her flinch. He's a tribal council member, and his input is crucial to the exhibit. Marcus stood, swirling his drink. I looked him up. Thomas Broken Rope, 35, divorced, lives on the reservation. Quite the step down from Harvard Law. Don't do this, Marcus. Do what? Protect my marriage? You're spending more time with him than with me. People are going to talk. We're working on an exhibit. You're developing feelings for him. Marcus set down his glass and approached her. Do you think I'm stupid, Sarah? I see how you light up when you talk about your project. When you talk about him. That's not. Don't lie to me. His shout made her jump. He caught himself, smoothed his expression back into icy calm. You're my wife. You took vows. In sickness and health, for better or worse. Those words meant something. Sarah felt something crack inside her. Did they? Because you treat me like property, not a partner. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, pain exploding across her cheek. In 8 years of marriage, Marcus had never hit her before. They both stood frozen, shocked. Sarah, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't mean, you pushed me to it. You made me. She ran. Up the stairs, into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She stared at herself in the mirror, watching the red mark bloom into a bruise. This was it. This was the line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Marcus knocked softly on the door. "Baby, please. I'm sorry. I've been under so much stress at work, and you've been so distant. We can fix this. I'll get help. We'll go to counseling." She didn't answer. She sat on the cold tile floor until she heard him give up and walk away. Then she pulled out her phone and stared at Thomas's number. He'd given it to her weeks ago, for work purposes. Her finger hovered over the call button, but she couldn't do it. Couldn't burden him with this. Couldn't admit how badly she'd failed at the life she'd chosen. Instead, she called her sister in Seattle. "Emma? I need help." Sarah moved through the next week in a fog of planning and fear. Her sister Emma had begged her to come to Seattle immediately, but Sarah insisted on finishing the exhibit first. It opened in 3 days. After that, she'd leave Marcus. She had it all mapped out. She'd pack while he was at work, drain her small savings account he didn't know about, drive to the airport and fly to Emma's. She just had to survive 3 more days. Marcus had become the perfect apologetic husband. Flowers appeared daily. He came home early, cooked dinner, suggested they take a vacation after the exhibit opened, maybe Hawaii, somewhere romantic to reconnect. His remorse seemed genuine, but Sarah had learned to see the calculation behind everything he did. This was another form of control, making her doubt her own judgment, making her question whether leaving was an overreaction. At the museum, she threw herself into final preparations with manic energy. The exhibit was beautiful, powerful, exactly what she'd envisioned. Margaret had blessed the space in a private ceremony that morning. Robert had approved all the interpretive text. Thomas had been quieter than usual, watching Sarah with concern that made her chest ache. On the final afternoon before the opening gala, she and Thomas were alone, making last-minute adjustments to artifact placements. The gallery was silent except for their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. "Something's wrong," Thomas said finally. He wasn't asking. Sarah's hand stilled on the display case she was adjusting. "The exhibit looks perfect." "I'm not talking about the exhibit." He moved closer, his dark eyes searching her face. "You're saying goodbye. I can feel it." She turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know what you mean." "Sarah." He said her name like a prayer. "Talk to me." And suddenly, the words were pouring out. She told him everything, the years of control, the isolation, the fear, the slap. She told him about her plan to leave, about her sister in Seattle, about how she just needed to get through the gala tomorrow night and then she'd be free. Thomas listened without interrupting, his face growing darker as she spoke. When she finished, they stood in silence for a long moment. "Come with me now," he said. "Don't wait. Don't go back to that house." "I can't. My things, my documents, everything I need is there. And tomorrow is the gala. I can't abandon the exhibit after all this work." "The exhibit doesn't matter more than your safety." "It matters to me," she said fiercely. "For 8 years, Marcus has taken everything from me, my friends, my confidence, my choices. This exhibit is mine. I need to see it through. I need to prove to myself that I can finish something I started." Thomas studied her for a long moment. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You know that." The words undid something in her. Tears started falling, and she couldn't stop them. Thomas pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean into his strength, just for a moment. He held her like she was precious, like she mattered, his hand gentle on her hair. "After the gala," he said quietly, "let me help you leave. You shouldn't do this alone." She pulled back to look at him. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Something flickered in his eyes, something warm and complicated that made her heart race. "Because you deserve kindness. Because I've watched you fight to honor my people's stories when you could have taken the easy route and reduced us to stereotypes. Because you're brilliant and brave and you deserve so much more than what you've been accepting." "Thomas." "I know. You're married. You're leaving. The timing is impossible." He stepped back, putting professional distance between them. "But after you're free, after you've had time to heal, I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner, where we talk about something other than artifacts and exhibitions. Where I can tell you how much I admire you without it being inappropriate." Sarah's phone rang, shattering the moment. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. She answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "Where are you?" Marcus demanded. "You promised you'd be home by 6. She glanced at the clock. 6:15. I'm finishing up. I'll be home soon. You've been saying that for 8 years, Sarah. Come home. Now. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. She ended the call and looked at Thomas. I have to go. Stay. Please. But she was already gathering her things, moving toward the elevator. Thomas followed, his concern palpable. Promise me you'll be careful, he said. Promise me if anything happens, you'll call. I'll come get you, no matter what time it is. I promise. She drove home through heavy traffic, her mind spinning. 3 more days had become 1 more night. Just get through the gala tomorrow, she told herself. Smile for the donors, give the speech, celebrate the exhibit. Then leave. Marcus was waiting by the door when she arrived. He looked at his watch pointedly. 45 minutes late. I'm sorry. Traffic was. Don't bother. He brushed past her, heading to his study. I'll be working. Don't disturb me. Sarah stood in the hallway, something nagging at her. Marcus had given up too easily. There was no explosion, no punishment, just cold dismissal. That wasn't like him. Later, as she lay in their bed pretending to sleep, she heard Marcus moving around downstairs. She crept to the top of the stairs and listened. He was on the phone, his voice low but audible. Yes, I'll be there tomorrow night. The museum gala. My wife's little project. A pause. No, this is the perfect venue. Everyone she works with will be there, including that tribal council member she's been spending so much time with. We'll make it very clear who she belongs to. Another pause, then a laugh that made Sarah's blood run cold. Trust me, after tomorrow night, Sarah will remember her place. Sarah backed away from the stairs, her heart pounding. She locked herself in the bathroom and called Emma with shaking hands. Something's wrong, she whispered. Marcus is planning something for tomorrow night. I don't know what, but Emma, I'm scared. Then don't go. Leave now. Tonight. I can't let him win. I can't let him take this from me too. Sarah. I'll be careful. The museum will be full of people. He can't do anything in front of everyone. She was trying to convince herself as much as her sister. After the gala, I'll leave straight from there. I won't even come back to the house. As she ended the call, Sarah stared at herself in the mirror. Tomorrow would either be her liberation or her breaking point. She didn't know which, but she knew she couldn't run anymore. Whatever Marcus was planning, she would face it. Just 1 more day. Then she would be free. The museum glowed with soft lighting and the murmur of well-dressed donors admiring the exhibit. Sarah stood near the entrance in a deep blue dress she'd bought with her secret credit card, greeting guests and accepting congratulations. The turnout was better than expected. Museum board members, prominent collectors, members of the Native American community, and local press. Marcus hadn't arrived yet. Thomas stood across the gallery with Margaret and Robert, looking striking in traditional formal wear, black pants, a ribbon shirt with intricate designs, and beaded bolo tie. Their eyes met occasionally across the room, and each time Sarah felt that pull, that sense of recognition she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. She'd packed her car that afternoon while Marcus was at work. 2 suitcases, her documents, her laptop, and a few irreplaceable items, her grandmother's jewelry, her college diplomas, photos from before Marcus. Everything else she was prepared to abandon. After the gala, she'd drive straight to the airport. Emma had booked her on the last flight to Seattle. The museum director, Patricia Crawford, approached with a champagne flute. Sarah, this is extraordinary. Best exhibit we've had in years. The board is thrilled. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without the guidance of the tribal representatives. Well, you should be very proud. Patricia paused, looking past Sarah's shoulder. Oh dear. Sarah turned and felt her stomach drop. Marcus had arrived, but he wasn't alone. He'd brought people, colleagues from his firm, including the senior partner everyone knew was grooming Marcus for managing partner. Making this professional, making it impossible for Sarah to cause a scene without damaging his carefully cultivated reputation. And Harris. She understood his strategy immediately. Whatever he planned to do, it would be public enough to humiliate her but calculated enough that she'd look unstable if she reacted. Marcus approached, all smiles and charm. He kissed her cheek, his fingers digging into her arm hard enough to bruise. Darling, you look beautiful. Sorry I'm late. Brought some friends to celebrate your success. She forced a smile. How thoughtful. For the next hour, Sarah gave her prepared speech, answered questions, and played the gracious curator. Marcus stayed close, playing the supportive husband, his hand possessive on her lower back. She felt like she was moving through water, everything slightly unreal. Then she saw Marcus and Thomas face each other near the weapons display. She moved quickly, arriving in time to hear Marcus say, "So you're the expert who's been monopolizing my wife's time." "I've been providing cultural consultation for the exhibit," Thomas replied evenly. "Of course. Nothing inappropriate about a married woman spending every evening with another man, as long as it's for work." Marcus's smile was dangerous. "Though I have to wonder about the ethics of someone in your position taking advantage of a vulnerable woman going through a rough patch in her marriage." Sarah's face burned. Several nearby guests had turned to listen. "Marcus, stop," she said quietly. "Stop what?" "I'm just having a conversation with your colleague." He turned back to Thomas. "You see, my wife has been very stressed lately. The pressures of the job, our marriage difficulties, sometimes she doesn't think clearly. Sometimes she develops inappropriate attachments. I hope you haven't encouraged anything that might give her the wrong impression." Thomas's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "The only impression I have is that Sarah is a brilliant, dedicated professional who deserves to be treated with respect." "Respect? Like the respect of pursuing a married woman?" "I haven't pursued anyone." "No? Then why does she light up when you're around? Why does she check her phone constantly, hoping for your messages? Why does she come home smelling like—" "Enough." Sarah's voice cut through the tension. She was shaking, but her words were clear. "Everyone is staring, Marcus. This is neither the time nor the place." He turned to her, and she saw the fury beneath his civilized mask. "You're right. Let's discuss this at home. We're leaving." "No." The word hung in the air. Marcus stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "I'm not leaving," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "This is my exhibit, my achievement, and I'm staying to see it through." Marcus's hand tightened on her arm. "Sarah, you're making a scene. Let's go outside and talk about this privately." She looked down at his hand, then up at his face. In that moment, she saw their entire future mapped out, him gradually tightening control, her becoming smaller and smaller until she disappeared entirely. She saw years of apologies that didn't mean anything, promises that would never be kept, and a lifetime of fear disguised as love. "Let go of me," she said. "Don't do this here." "Let go." He released her, and she stepped back. Thomas moved closer, not intervening but present, a solid reminder that she wasn't alone. Sarah turned to the gathered crowd. Her museum colleagues, Marcus's law partners, board members, strangers who'd come to celebrate art and culture and had stumbled into private drama. She should have been mortified. Instead, she felt clear-headed for the first time in years. "I apologize for the disruption," she said. "Please, continue enjoying the exhibit. The bar is open, and we have presentations starting in 20 minutes. Patricia Crawford began gently herding people back toward the main gallery. Marcus stood frozen, clearly not expecting Sarah's composure. "We'll talk at home," he said through clenched teeth. "No, we won't. Because I'm not coming home. I'm leaving you, Marcus." His face went white, then red. "You can't. Everything you have, I gave you. This job, this life." "You're wrong. You didn't give me anything. You took everything, my friends, my confidence, my autonomy. You made me small so you could feel big. And I let you, because I was young and stupid and I believed that love meant sacrifice. But what you showed me wasn't love. It was control." "Sarah, please." His voice cracked. "I love you. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. Remember our vows." "I remember. For better or worse. I gave you 8 years of worse, Marcus. I'm done." She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Marcus start to follow, then Thomas's deep voice, "Let her go. This is none of your business." "Actually, it is. Because Sarah is my friend, and I don't let people hurt my friends." Sarah didn't hear the rest. She pushed through the museum doors into the cool night air, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and fear and something that might have been joy. Her car was parked in the lot with everything she needed to start over. Behind her, footsteps. She turned, expecting Marcus, but it was Thomas. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to cause problems." "You didn't. Marcus caused problems. Marcus has always caused problems. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise." They stood in the parking lot, the sounds of the gala drifting through the open museum doors. Sarah felt untethered, terrified, and more alive than she'd been in years. "Where will you go?" Thomas asked. "Seattle. My sister's there. After that, I don't know. Figure out who I am when I'm not busy being afraid." He nodded slowly. "When you're ready, when you've had time to heal and remember who you are, I meant what I said about dinner." Sarah looked at him, this man who'd shown her what respect looked like, who'd treated her like an equal, who'd stood beside her without trying to control her. "Ask me again in 6 months, she said. "When I'm free. Really free. I will." She got in her car, started the engine, and drove away from the museum, from Marcus, from 8 years of fear. In her rearview mirror, she saw Thomas standing in the parking lot, watching her go. Not following, not demanding, just bearing witness to her freedom. Sarah drove through the city toward the airport, toward her sister, toward an unknown future that was entirely hers to choose. She didn't know what came next. She didn't have a plan beyond escape. But for the first time in 8 years, she was making her own decisions. And that felt like liberation.